So, Amanda, I'd love to go straight to you. So welcome and thank you for your time today. So I'd love to be able to start with the hard science around anxiety, sort of get a real understanding of that. And maybe you can chat a little bit more about how we can recognize if we are having anxiety, and then how can we deal with it?
Yeah, definitely. Good morning to everybody, and thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this amazing conversation. It really does, demonstrate that we have a pretty incredible community here on the Sunshine Coast. But I'd love to have a chat to you all a bit this morning about, what is anxiety and what is it doing to our brains? Because the more we understand about, the early signs and symptoms and what's going on at a biological level, we actually have the opportunity to, intervene early and to manage our behaviours to be able to cope in this new environment with these new stresses. And when we have that information, when we're coping well, we can be better leaders, better creators, better partners, parents, and friends. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about the biology of anxiety and stress this morning as well. But I'd love to open the questions as well. So as I'm having a chat this morning, if you have any questions or something's resonating with you, please feel free to add a comment to the chain, and I'd love to have more of an interactive chat this morning. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit more about the mental health continuum. So one of the most important things that we should be doing in the current environment is keeping things in perspective. So I'll start by showing you the mental health continuum. I'll share my screen, perhaps that might be the best way to do it.
And while you're sharing the screen, guys, those of you guys that are attending, don't be afraid to put into the chat section, just in the corner, you'll see a little chat box. Don't forget to type in some questions that you might have as Amanda's chatting to us, because we'd love to have this as an interactive Q&A. We'll answer those questions at the end.
Definitely, thanks, Jackie. So the mental health continuum is something that I really like to lead with. It illustrates that we are actually operating up and down this continuum every day of our lives. So there are days where we feel very mentally well. We have normal mood fluctuations. That is to say, we can still feel angry and frustrated and stressed, but it's a normal response to a normal stimuli. So we fluctuate our moods in a normal way. We feel physically well. We feel socially active. We feel like our optimal selves or our best selves. Now, it wouldn't come as a surprise, but we don't feel like that absolutely every day. We can become a little bit more reactive. We can be irritable. We can have, low energy or not quite feel ourselves as we start to slip down that continuum. In the current environment with the pandemic and with working from home and all of this uncertainty, it wouldn't be surprising if we are starting to see ourselves slip down this continuum, start to struggle a little bit. Not feel ourselves. And so this morning I'm going to tell you a little bit more about why you might not be feeling yourself and what we can do about it, because that's the most important part of this conversation is, there's a lot going on, but there's also a lot that we can be doing to support our mental health. And I, for one, am getting a little bit sick of hearing support your mental health without really understanding what that means or what that looks like. So I'm going to make sure that I give you some practical skills today. But do shoot me any questions or comments of things that you're doing that are working for you as well. I'll change the slide. There we go. So what does anxiety look like? Now, I've just put a lot of information up on the screen there, and I don't expect you to read through it in any detail. There won't be a pop quiz later. But I'd just like to illustrate that there are behaviours, thoughts, feelings, and physical signs of anxiety and stress. And, we can feel these things as part of a normal mood fluctuation any day of the week. But when we start to experience these things for days or weeks at a time, or they start to impact our performance. So we just got the comment there that somebody is definitely relating to, feeling the mind blank. This is a response to a stressor. And this is a normal part of dealing with a new environment, but it can also start to be pervasive, or it can start to impact our ability to do life. And that's why we need to be very proactive about our coping strategies so we can kind of overcome some of these signs and symptoms. Now, I would also like to take a moment to introduce these things not just as signs and symptoms of anxiety, but as signs and symptoms of invitations. So when we start to notice these things, either on ourselves or on people that we care about, these are actually invitations for us to have a conversation. So if you're noticing that one of your colleagues is very nervous, or they're very self-conscious in your video conferencing, that is an invitation for you to say, "Hi, I've noticed that you're feeling on edge. You're a bit more nervous than you usually are. Would you like to have a conversation?" And you can take that conversation offline and give it the time and the space that's needed to unpack it a little bit and understand it a little bit more. So if you take nothing more away from my chat this morning, when you see these things, or when you feel these things about another person, because we're very intuitive beings as well, use them as invitations to have a conversation. And it doesn't have to be a full, deep and meaningful, but checking in with people is a very important part of what we need to be doing right now. So your brain hurts.
Yes, it does.
My brain hurts. Many people that I'm talking to, their brains are hurting. And it's a lot to do with overstimulus. There is a lot going on right now. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about why you're probably feeling that cognitive load, why you're probably experiencing things like decreased memory or a loss of concentration or difficulty making judgments or decisions about things. I was actually talking to a friend the other day who misplaced her paper towels, which is almost like misplacing $100 at the moment.
Yes.
And she was very, very distressed because she couldn't remember where she'd put the paper towels. And she's a very capable, well-rounded young lady, and this wouldn't usually be an issue. But because of all of this extra information and extra stress that's going on, that simple act of losing the paper towels or not remembering where she put the paper towels had her teetering on the edge of her hair out. Now, the reason that that's happening is for quite a biological reason. So what's going on in the brain? So one of the hormones or the chemicals that are released when we're experiencing stress is cortisol. And cortisol in the short term is actually a very helpful thing. So it makes us attend to information with more detail. So we'll remember a lot more specific information. But if we are under the influence of cortisol, or we have an influx of cortisol for too long, it can actually start to impact our brain's chemistry. So as our cortisol levels rise, the connections between where we process feelings and where we make judgments and decisions, so our amygdala and hippocampus and our prefrontal cortex, those connections actually start to malfunction. And over time, if we continue to be in this heightened state of stress with this heightened influx of cortisol, those connections can actually suffer long-term damage. There's actually some studies that have shown that your brain can even shrink. So that's not necessarily a good situation that we want to find ourselves in, which is, again, why we need to be proactive and be looking at things that we can do to mitigate the impact of cortisol, the impact of stress on our brains, and keep ourselves healthier. Now, there's been a lot of posting and commenting and sharing of in-home workouts and exercise regimes. And I, for one, am actually getting quite anxious about all of that. I'm feeling like I'm meant to be training for a marathon while in self-isolation, which is a bit of a stressful thing in itself, but there is some science behind it. So one of the best things that we can do for our brains is move our bodies, create the counteractive chemicals that come from participating in exercise. Now, one of the most important parts of this, though, is you have to be doing something that you enjoy. So intention is half of the battle. If you're, lifting your coffee table above your head and, doing weights with milk bottles and you're hating every second of it, you won't actually get the full benefit of that physical movement. So finding something that might just be as simple as, doing lunges around the house or walking the dog to the letterbox and back if you're able to do so. Housework is another great example of exercise. And if you're tuned into some music and you're enjoying it, you will get the full benefits of that exercise, which means that your brain will be getting the full protective factors that start to mitigate or reduce the impact of that ongoing cortisol. Now, the point that I'd like to finish with on this particular part of what I was talking about today is, having interrupted concentration, or misplacing the paper towels, or not being able to make a decision on something that you used to be able to do all the time. It's very normal. It's a very normal response to what's going on. But this isn't a sprint. It is a marathon. This is going to be a condition that we're going to be living in for a while. We have to be building the healthy coping strategies around ourselves. So, be kind to yourself when you can't decide if you're having fried rice or steak for dinner. Be kind to yourself if you can't concentrate while you're trying to work from home. Be kind to yourself because you're learning new behaviours. Get up, move about, fold some laundry, mow the lawn. Do something that will bring you a bit of joy, a bit of separation from what you're trying to work on, but be kind to yourself because you're relearning new skills at the moment, and that's hard.
Yeah, Amanda, I can actually relate in regards to that. My daughter and I have been trying to do our workouts via Zoom, as you've just mentioned, and taking something that we normally enjoy and putting it into our home environment. I recognized that she was having signs of anxiety because she was saying things like the kettlebell it's just not the same kettlebell, or the concrete's too hard and it hurts my knees when I'm doing burpees and we're normally on mats. And she kind of kept building on everything that she would normally find a release from and enjoy. And I just said to her, look, babe, just go and watch Netflix. Just this doesn't have to happen today. It doesn't have to be what's going to make you feel better. So is that something like what you're explaining? Is that something that is a good example?
Yeah, definitely. So things that we may have done every day up until now, they might have brought us joy before, but as we're trying to relearn how to do it, it's very frustrating. So if you think of small children who are learning to walk or ride a bike, they're going to fall over and get frustrated, and there's going to be a lot of tears a lot of times before they're zooming around more than capable. So in this time, in this space right now, as we're learning how to do our workouts at home and become more accustomed to not having the cushy aircon of the gym or the silence and pristine office environment, as we're learning how to deal with our new environment, being aware that sometimes we will need to take a step back and give ourselves some space, but also being that voice for somebody else is very important as well, Jackie. So you were able to offer your daughter that clarity, that voice of reason, if you will. And that's why it's really important to be checking in with the people around us as well. So they might be having a lot of trouble making the decision, or judging whether or not they should continue to work out because they've worked out every day. But they might just need that voice of reason, that calming voice of, hey, it's just not working right now. How about we go do something else and we'll come back to it in a minute. So keeping that calm is really, really important, because otherwise we'll get caught in a bit of a spin. And stress creates cognitive overload. So stress creates the inability to concentrate or make decisions. And then the stress about not being able to make the decision actually exacerbates the stress, and we start to go on this bit of a spiral.
Becomes circular. Yeah, that's good.
It becomes circular. So taking that step back, taking that breather, giving yourself the time and space and the recognition that you are learning something new. It might look like something that you've done every day for the last 10 years, 20 years, but we're doing it in a new environment. So the information just constantly in the background about the coronavirus and the isolation and all of the changing guidelines that are coming down as well, that's always in the back of our minds, and that's a really difficult thing to be working with. Mm-hmm. So making those conscious choices or the conscious decision to be kind to yourself as you're learning this new skill is really important.
Yeah, that's good.
Doing your CrossFit workouts from home, that's very impressive. Now, another part of stress that I'm going to touch on really briefly, because I know we've got another amazing presentation coming up as well, is that not all stress is bad. So a very underspoken about part of the stress response is actually oxytocin, which is our bonding hormone or our cuddle hormone. It's actually one of the neurohormones that are also released in a stressful situation. Now, the best way to explain this is actually from an evolutionary perspective. So back in the day when we were living out of, caves and trying to not be eaten by saber-toothed tigers, it makes a lot of sense that when we're stressed or when we're anxious, that we have the biological drive to partner, to find our social group, because we have that power in numbers. So you might actually find, as part of your stress response, is you're wanting to tell people about your story, or you want to reach out to people. It's probably one of the reasons why people are really struggling with this whole self-isolation, because their stress response is telling them they need to hug their friends, to be around their friends, to share the information. The point that I want to make with this is, this can be a very strong and positive part of this whole experience. If we're all operating on this, bonding hormone, it's not only reaching out to have that social connection yourself, but you're actually, it increases your empathy as well. So you're being more giving, or people are being more giving with their time, because it's part of that response. So if we harness this energy, this information, this biological drive, we have the opportunity to come together as a community. And that's exactly what we're seeing in more cases as this self-isolation progresses. And the more we can, help out others and reach out to other people and provide support in lots of new and creative ways, the better off we'll be in the long term. So keep in mind that you will be feeling this drive to, hug your dog or friend, but make sure you're using the right information, or sharing the right information. So we connected with people over much, much more than the coronavirus before now. So when you're talking to friends, try and talk about the things that you used to connect over. When you're in meetings with your colleagues, make sure you're asking about the regular everyday things instead of bringing the stressor back into everybody's full mind. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with, joining the chat forums and being part of the community boards on Facebook, or the Beyond Blue Surviving the Virus chat thread as well. That's a great resource. But be mindful of what information you're talking about and what you're sharing. Try and focus on the positive parts of your experience and share those, not in a fraudulent or look at me, I'm so happy kind of way, but just to bring that variety back into our spaces, because our media is overrun with constant updates about the virus. So we just need to be a bit mindful that, we existed with a lot more information previously about a lot of different variety of things. So bring that variety back into your space, and it will definitely improve or help your brain space to be creative, to be connected, and to feel a little bit normal for a minute. Now, I'd just like to finish up by drawing it back to the mental health continuum, and just highlight that there's things that we can be doing every day to support our mental health. There you go. I ended up by saying it, support your mental health. To be proactive about how we're protecting our brains from this stress response. As I said before, it's going to be a marathon. So doing things like keeping things in perspective. So there's a lot of panic responses around, are we ever going to be able to buy toilet paper again? And, are we ever going to be able to leave our houses? But keeping this in perspective, it is a pandemic. It is very serious, but it's not the apocalypse. I'm pretty confident that zombies aren't going to come storming. So keep yourself calm by keeping things in perspective and reaching out. So supporting others is actually one of the greatest ways to feel good. So the endorphins that are released, and the oxytocin that's released when we help another person, is a really powerful thing. But depending on where you are in your mental health journey, and on any particular day where you are on that mental health continuum, there's strategies that you can be implementing to help bring some semblance of normality to you, to help you feel a little bit more calm, more settled, and more on top of things. but also be kind to yourself if you're having a bad day. This is
Yeah.
new. You're learning how to ride a bike for the first time ever, and that's going to come with some challenges. So be kind to yourself around those challenges, and reach out, seek support. There are so many amazing resources that are now becoming available on the phone or webinars.
And I think you guys actually have one, don't you, Amanda? You have an app that I'll put a link to that app in the chat that people can actually be able to use.
Yeah, the iHelp Sunshine Coast is actually an app that the Alliance for Suicide Prevention developed in response to needing to connect our community to the resources that are available on the coast. So if you're looking for specific services, so if you're a 24-year-old male in Buderim and you want to know what kind of peer support there is available, you can use the iHelp tool to find that specific information that's relevant to you.
Excellent. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda. I'm actually going to take a lot of the key stuff that you've actually shared with us today, and I'll place it into our Facebook group. Just as our Facebook group essentially is a repository of everything that's occurring or happening in the webinars, and so people can, who have attended, can go over there and be able to review and share and have conversations beyond what we've been able to have today. But that's brilliant, Amanda. Thank you for normalizing stress for me. My million Post-it notes all over my monitor that are helping me with my mind blanks. And then also my weird obsession with covering my dog has made me all now feel very, very normal. So I do appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome.